Hey, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, we want to thank you and welcome you. We want to invite you over to our website, studentministryconversations.org, where you can check out all of our recent blog posts, our podcast episodes, our show notes for those episodes, and everything in between, and then the new stuff in our store. But our goal with this podcast is that you are inspired, encouraged, and the things that you hear on this podcast might equip you to be a better student pastor for the church that you're serving in. And so today is episode 200. I feel like I need one of those wah, 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 kind of things. I'm sure that's a horrible explanation, but we have reached the end of season 4. I cannot believe it. That is absolutely crazy to me. When I was asked to start this with Russell back in April of 2021, I never imagined we'd make it through one season, let alone 4 seasons. And now we are streamlining into season 5. And so before we hit our topic, we're going to spend just a few seconds talking about the future. And one of the things that we've been discussing over the past couple episodes is the fact that with this, we are moving towards a new way that we are going to start presenting this podcast. If you've been a listener for a long time, what we have done and what we have always said is we believe that every youth pastor has a voice, and we still stand behind that. But guests are really, really hard to schedule and record, and it was getting really, really hard. And we had to make the choice for the sake of content and actually having our episodes week to week that we had to step away from some guest episodes just for the sake of being able to publish and put out enough episodes to keep this podcast going week to week, because we feel like that's important and we want to be out and producing content for you guys. So with that being said, we are still doing guest episodes, but we are moving to more roundtable discussions. And last week and this week, we have both done the same thing, as well as a few others throughout the past season. But we are going to be moving primarily to where it is me and Melissa and David and Russell when he can join us. And we are just going to be doing different conversations about different topics in youth ministry. And so last week we started with that conversation, and we were talking about mistakes in youth ministry. And Melissa had the idea, and we were like, hey, that's great, but you can really take this in 2 different ways. So with that, our last conversation was talking about the mistakes that students make and how we as youth pastors should respond to those mistakes. But then we're doing, like I said, part 2 of this conversation, and that is, how do we handle it when we make mistakes as youth pastors? And I'm sure that if you're listening, you're like, well, I never make mistakes. But it is one of those things that I feel like all of us have done it at a time or two. We might not have the exact same severity of mistakes, but we have all made accidents, oopsies, whatever you want to call them. And some of them have had more repercussions than others. So with that being said, before we go into any specific like stories and examples, because those kind of take a little bit more time, as a youth pastor, you two, how do you personally deal with the emotional impact of making a mistake or a bad choice in ministry?
That's a great question. There is so much, I think, more guilt associated with making a mistake in youth ministry than I think there would be with a regular job. I don't know. I think it's the specific action just seems like it has more of an impact. And so I think that's one of the things you have to get over, but also kind of live with at the same time. Like, not let it take over, I guess, is where I'm going with. Like, you don't want it to be, keeping you up at night. But I would say the emotional feelings of making a mistake in youth ministry, I feel like they are higher than when I was working, at a coffee shop, things like that. So, okay.
That's fair.
David?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I don't feel like I have anything more to add to that, but yeah, I definitely feel the severity, especially as I've gotten older, because it's like there's almost a level of like, doing youth ministry. I talked about like in the last episode, like doing the youth ministry at 19, 18, even like 16, 17, as Brent and I both have experience in high school leading in that way. There was a lot more grace, when you're that young leading. You're in charge, but there are also people who are, from an insurance standpoint, who are going to take legal ramifications, but then you get to a certain point, you're over the age of 25, you can drive a van in the state of Texas. There's things like that where the older you get, the more they expect that you make less and less mistakes, especially because you've been doing it a long time. And so there's almost a level of, I don't know about you guys, but like there are times where when you do make those boneheaded mistakes, I tend to take it a lot harder than I probably should, because I think there's a level of, David, you've been doing this a long time. Like, bro, like it's almost
you
like
should
you're
have
not
known better.
allowed to make little mistakes like that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Should have
you
known
should have known
better.
better. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's good. And so how do you balance taking responsibility for those mistakes while maintaining confidence in your leadership? Because I think that's one of the first things that happens is when we do make these mistakes and these failures, it's like, oh man, am I really cut out for this? Do I really think and like you immediately get bombarded and attacked, and all these negative things start to rush into your head. So how do you maintain that confidence that God put you here when you are having to deal with responsibility for making the mistakes? And obviously, I think this has some different tiers, because I mean, you forgetting to like put something in the bulletin is probably not near as severe as you saying something wrong to a student,
Or leaving a kid.
something to that nature, or if someone calls you out on your theology or something to that nature. There are things obviously tiered with this, but how do you maintain the confidence of your leadership while you're trying to deal with the accountability of your actions?
I think, well, there's that honesty part, but there is also the owning up to a part of honesty that I think our students will see as good, and still having authority, because that's kind of what we're worried about right here, that if we say we've done this stupid thing, so the kids will be like, well, you do stupid things, I do stupid things, we're equal, or like not equal, but like I don't have to listen to you anymore. So I'm going to tell stories of things that happened at my last church, because my boss listens to this, so we're going to tell things that happened at this church. But so like I ran the church van into the parking pylon. Like I didn't know that I was that close, and it was dark. Yeah, I've done that in this vans too. But like the last church I ran into, and it created a little dent, and I had to go back and not only tell the pastor, but I had to tell the church leadership. And luckily, it did not require insurance company or even the shop to fix anything, that kind of thing. But the kids were all in the van when I did this. And so then they're, a little bit like, Melissa can't drive, that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was honest, and hey, all of us, even when we're driving, as adults, make mistakes. And we had a kind of conversation about that. And so I saved it a little bit that way. But I know that is a worry for people. If I do this one thing, especially if you've made a mistake in your personal life with relationships or things like that, we always have that worry when pastoral staff, when they have, there's a divorce that happens. Like, how can I tell students not to do these things when this is happening in my own life? So what do y'all think about that? Should there be a compartmentalizing kind of thing with that?
It's definitely a hard subject for sure, because one of the things is it goes both sides. I mean, it's kind of the same argument and the same conversation of like, when we tell our kids, hey, like, don't date in high school, it's not worth it. Yet I married my wife and we dated in high school. There's two sides of this. And so while that's not necessarily a mistake to go after, like to say or apologize for or anything to that nature, but it does hold us accountable to where students are like, well, you say this, but like, I mean, and so I think part of it is honesty and transparency. And I think it's just really like owning up to when you make mistakes, even in front of your students. If you play it off like nothing happened, or if you play it off like it doesn't matter, then students see through crap real fast, and they're going to see you as hypocritical. They're going to see you as not trustworthy. They're going to see a ton of different things that you don't want to emphasize in your program. And so honesty and transparency is big. And so when you talk about struggles that you have or struggles that you have had, it is important to be honest with them, because students are honesty seekers,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
they want to find out if someone's telling the truth or not. And so if you're not doing that on a regular basis, you need to be. That would be my thing.
I would say even in some of like the smaller situations, like, um, man, there have been times where I was just beat down for whatever reason, whether it's like I'm tired or I'm upset or I'm whatever, and it comes out in like for me when my confidence starts to shake, um, I wear it all over like my body. Body language, I guess, is a good way to, um, as Brent can attest because he's seen it. When I get real down, and so like I'll start to apologize a lot. The more nervous I get, or the more insecure I get, the more I apologize for things. And like, so there have been times where you're on stage and you're trying your best to give a message, and I've had whole moments where I went, okay, let's pause. Everybody take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. And I like to just own it in real time. Like, guys, I'm struggling right now. Would it be
Mhm.
okay? Would it be okay if I prayed for a moment, and would I've even had moments too where I asked a student that I really trusted, like specifically, I've got one student here, and I don't mind naming her name because it's honoring, but there's a student named Lauren who is phenomenal with prayer. She's seventh grade. Girl is an incredible leader. She'll be one of our junior counselors before too long. Incredible human being. And there was one moment I was really struggling. I was like, "Hey, Lauren, could you take a second just to pray for me? I'm struggling here, And it's not necessarily a mistake, but because I allowed this insecurity to creep in, I knew I was upset. And what I
Mhm.
should have done is I should have shown up an hour earlier and took some time at the altar and prayed. I should have taken some time to worship. I should have taken some time to dig into the word. But I allowed myself to stay really, really busy, and instead of like dealing with um, the situation dealt with me. And it's not necessarily a mistake. It's not even really a failure, but it is a moment of
Mhm.
going, I have to own that in this moment I'm weak and I could use some prayer. And being able to elevate a student to go, I don't care if you're 12 years old, 13 years old, 17 years old, or 40 years old, or 70 years old. Like in this moment, I could use some prayer. Anybody willing to, and being able to let them lead in that situation, let them see, hey, I'm feeling a little vulnerable. Okay, great. And they get to be a part of, so many times we're supposed to be the one helping them. But the thing that I don't think gets talked about as much is how many times they help us when we're feeling like garbage or we've made a mistake and they go, you know what? It's okay. I'm with you. How many
Well,
times
and
does
you're
that happen when they flip the script?
yeah. Well, and you're showing them what to do when they feel that exact same way.
Yeah.
Like you're giving them actionable instructions essentially.
Mhm.
Like that when you feel this way, this is what you should do. This should be
Mhm.
your next step. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, for sure. And then just like I said, and then when it gets into like more of like I think of the mistakes I tend to make, bad ADHD. And so I'm the guy who it's out of sight, out of mind. And so I will totally forget to text a student when I need or to remind them or something. And probably the biggest mistake I make is forgetting to communicate. And so owning those and going, I'm sorry, that's on me. Like I had a student who didn't make it to worship practice, and I'll just throw it out there. It was pastor's daughter, and pastor gets on to her and was like, well, you know what time practice is. You're supposed to. Actually, no, she didn't. I didn't tell her about practice, and that was on me. I needed our vocalist was out sick, and I texted her the night before and asked her if she could fill in. And so, no, she didn't make practice because David didn't tell her to go to practice. I gave her the song set. She knew the songs, and I just didn't even think to tell her about practice. And so she was getting reamed for not for being late to worship practice. It was on me. It wasn't on her. She was filling
Mhm.
in. She was doing like the right thing. And so in that moment, owning it and saying, hey, hold on, hold on, hold on. That's on me. I should have communicated that. He's like, well, but she should have asked when practice was. And I was like, is she the worship leader or am I? And he's like, good point. And so, even in a situation like that, I could have let her take the blame.
That's what I was
but I
just thinking.
shouldn't.
Yeah. That would be really easy just to set the back because that's your boss and like there
Yeah.
could be repercussions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So good job.
Yeah.
Speaking
So
of.
how do you prevent from making the same mistake twice? What
Ooh.
systems or what plans do you have in place that keep you from doing that? Because I think a lot of times we have these moments where it's like, oh man, I'm never going to do that again, and then you do it again, and then it's like, oh dang it.
Yeah.
Um, so what systems do you have in place to help you learn and grow from failures?
My most used app on my phone is my notes app. I write everything down. I don't know. Let's look. Doesn't matter. I have like 6,000 notes. I'm not even kidding. For everything. I have a note for leading worship at a men's retreat here in like 2 hours. And I have a note that has my packing list and it has all of our set lists and it has like what cables I need and all the things. Because if I don't have a checklist, it does not get done. I am out of sight, out of mind. That is who I am. And so, like, for Sunday morning, I have a Sunday morning checklist. First thing I do when I get there, and I look at it every Sunday. And it would be easy to go, well, you're in a routine. You know what you're supposed to do until somebody comes and distracts you. Or
Mhm.
somebody shows up and they're like, hey, got to tell you this story. Awesome, great. Well, that story took 20 minutes and now I'm off my routine. I have heavy ADHD to the point where anyway, I'm learning that I'm closer to the autism spectrum than I realized. And anyway, and so I'm realizing that if I get out of routine, it will blow up my entire day, and I
Yeah.
can't get back. And so it's very difficult for me. And so I have to have systems, and you know, my son is autistic, and that has helped me too in those situations. And so I've not only learned from my son, but also from my own tendencies to make mistakes in those things. And so without a proper checklist that I meticulously check, you know, multiple times a day, even with our planning center leading worship, I create our planning center worship, and the entire worship service I'm checking it off in my head.
Mhm.
Because you have to, things get missed, and sometimes it's not even you, maybe it's somebody else misses something, and I could just throw a quick text to our media people and go, hey, we missed that, can we bring that up at a different time? Or I can text Tyler, our pastor, and say, hey, yeah, we totally skipped that. Do we want to try to attempt that, or do we need to move on, you know, that kind of thing. And so I always have my checklist open. It's the only thing that keeps me from missing stuff.
My
Yeah.
ADHD is time blindness, so alarms is what
Yeah, yeah.
mine, and then
Yeah.
doing the thing immediately when I think about it. If I
Hmm.
have to stop and do it, otherwise I will miss it. Um, I think the other thing is practice, especially when our mistakes are, getting grumpy with the students in our group for doing silly things. If I, the thing, my mistake is if I yell at them. And so I think that's definitely practice and taking that breath. Um, I have no answers for not hitting things with Vans because I keep doing it.
Well,
So
you probably shouldn't do that twice. Maybe you need an extra camera in the front of your van.
I need a camera in general, and maybe someone else needs to drive. We'll
I was
go
about
with
to
it.
say, this is a great way to equip. I
Yeah.
need a driving team. I need five men or women who are willing to get on a schedule. You don't have to do it every week,
Yeah.
but once a
Luckily,
month.
not luckily, all my things have been on mission trips or camp that I have hit things. And so then it makes it more difficult because my volunteers that go with me at camp are usually under 25. So I'm still usually the
Yeah,
driver.
that's fair. That's fair.
But yeah, a
That's a hard
camera,
thing.
that would be a great solution for me not to back into things.
Mhm.
So
Or even
That's fair.
having people
That's
with
fair.
you to help, like, you know, navigate that.
that
Because
is true.
sometimes you think like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but like
Mhm.
I had a volunteer who was trying to back the bus out of the little awning and
Mhm.
totally like hit it on the roof because they didn't create enough space, there's only one way to get the bus out, and if you don't hit it perfect, you will scrape the top every single time. And they ended up like ripping a hole in the roof, and it
Of the
shook
bus?
of the bus. Yeah. And so it was one of those, like, it shook her confidence so much she never drove again. And it was one of those things where it was like, if we weren't all like talking in the parking lot while she was getting the
Mm-hmm.
bus, we could have been there to help her. So she shouldn't have to shoulder the whole thing. Leadership came down hard on her, and I felt so bad because I just told her, I told the leadership, I was like, we were all there. Some of you guys that are on
Yeah.
leadership were also on that trip, and you weren't helping her either. She went and
Yeah.
got the bus. She was serving while we were in the parking lot talking to students. We could
Mm-hmm.
have been helping too. And so she doesn't shoulder that whole blame. We should have been there to help her back out. I even pointed some fingers and was like, and you're the one that knows the best way to, the one that was really getting onto her. I was like, you're the one who best knows how to back out the bus. Why didn't you think to do it?
Mm-hmm.
So, let's all take responsibility here.
Yeah. And so as kind of a closing question for this episode, as a mentor or a leader in student ministry, what advice would you give to youth pastors who are struggling with the consequence of a mistake or a poor choice in ministry? Basically, what is any advice that you'd give them to move forward? And then we will kind of stop and go from there.
I would say number one, you got to own it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, own it, deal with the consequences. But understand that you're not alone. And so if you don't have a good mentor in your life, we need to change that right now. Because that is one of the best ways to prevent mistakes, is to have people who are in your life who are willing to tell you the hard things that your wife or your friends may not be okay with saying, or it would be awkward for them or whatever. And so you need somebody who's unapologetic and telling you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear. And then I think, and this one's a hard one, and I know it's very nuanced from church to church, but to the best of your ability, you need to try to cultivate a good relationship with the staff that you're working with and your leadership, because if
Yeah.
you don't have that, you don't have someone who has your back in those moments. And that's a hard thing. I've been in those situations where you make a mistake or somebody else makes a mistake and you get blamed for it. But you still have to own it. And when you don't
Sure.
have that support, it's isolating and it's hard, and it's a challenge. And so I think you have to do the best that you can to cultivate a relationship with the staff that's around you, with the senior pastor that's over you, and with the leadership team or council or elder board or whatever you have at your church. Try to build a relationship of having at least that one person that you can trust. If you don't have that, or maybe here's another owning situation. Maybe you've burned a lot of bridges. Start with one person and just go, hey, listen, I
Yeah.
want to grow. I want to cultivate a relationship, and I own that I've made a lot of mistakes, or I've done a lot of things that I'm not super, super proud of. How do we move forward? And if you can't move forward, well, then maybe a whole nother conversation needs to happen. But, and then
Sure.
I would say the other side of that is you have to have somebody outside the ministry who can also, hold you accountable in that situation. So, having people, like for me, I go to Brent a lot, or I have in the past. And, the funny thing is he's always had a unique perspective, because he's either, like, in my current church he grew up in my last church, he has family that went to that church, and his wife grew up there. So, he's always had, maybe a little bit more of a, foot in the door than maybe other people. But at the same time, it's always been a situation where I could talk about the situation, and Brent isn't afraid to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And sometimes those situations are, maybe you need to think of whether or not you need to be there, and that was
My thing.
conversations
Wait
that
for it.
need to be heard. And so have those people inside your ministry, inside your staff and leadership, and have people outside of your ministry who love you and want to see you succeed. And if you have made those mistakes, own them and try to make a bridge forward, because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah. Melissa, do you have anything to add?
I did. So I would say, yes, build those relationships and take the time to build the trust back. But we know that there are lots of churches that either hold grudges or people don't forgive. We know there's a lot of bad leadership out there,
Mhm.
and so I'm gonna say the hard thing here, that if that's not looking like something that you can do, is build that trust back. I don't say run away from the problem. That's what we're not saying here, but if this is not going to work out, I don't want you to be miserable. Like,
Yeah.
don't stay just because. And you do need to learn from mistakes, but the learning from mistakes may be that this is not the place for me. That somewhere else may be where I am being called in this moment, and you can do better there. But and you need to be honest with that next place. That these are the things that
Yes,
I've
yes,
done in the
yes.
past. So I wouldn't say running away. Like, that's not what, I made one mistake, I need to find a new church. But if that's not a culture that forgiveness is part of their curriculum,
Yeah.
then that may be it may be time to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so lastly, I would say is every situation, every mistake, everything that you do has actionable steps to get out of it. You need to figure out
Yeah.
what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know way too many people that make a mistake and they just kind of wallow and like get sad and get upset and like are just afraid that they've ruined situations, but they never take steps to get out of it.
Yeah.
And so the thing is in most of, if not all of these situations, the faster you get moving towards actionable steps to either make amends or
Fix it.
repair or fix or do whatever you need to do, almost always there are actionable steps that get you there. And so you need to figure out what's step one. You're not jumping to the end, but you need to start making steps towards whatever situation you're in. So if that's small, like maybe you made a parent mad because a kid didn't get to do something and or a kid wasn't involved in a thing because they didn't know about it, or maybe you embarrassed a kid or something to that nature.
Mhm.
That obviously the actionable steps is towards that kid and towards those parents.
Yeah.
Get out, make your amends, work towards rebuilding those relationships and move on. If it's with your pastor or your leadership team, then you need to work towards making amends and work towards those steps that will begin to repair those relationships as well. But actionable steps are the best thing to do in any and every situation, especially when it comes to you having to make up ground for whatever you did. Once you've owned up, you got to start making steps and move towards the things that you need to get done. If you don't, people will see that they will doubt your seriousness. They will
Yeah.
doubt your authenticity when you say, I'm sorry, or when you act remorseful.
Or your
All of those
professionalism.
things, yeah, they'll doubt your professionalism. So once you've realized, once you've owned up, start making steps to make it right. And that might be steps for a week. That might be steps for a month. That might be steps for years trying to
Yeah.
regain ground on some of those decisions. But for the sake of it, let's just try to avoid those decisions that would take years to
Yeah.
overcome.
Yeah.
Because the best offense is a defense. You hear that all the time. So the more that you defend yourself from making bad mistakes, the less you have to take actionable steps to do repair instead of be proactive.
And that's why
So,
mentorship matters, and that's why accountability matters, because, you know, you don't put yourself in. I'm gonna go ahead and just call it what it is. There's a reason why it seems like every other day there is a pastor in the news.
Mm-hmm.
We know what I'm talking about, and they didn't just get to that place overnight. It was days, weeks, months, or years of walking in the wrong direction, or feeling alone, or you name it, or depression, or mental, I mean, whole nother conversation. But at the end of the day, like, when we talk about youth ministry mistakes, pastoral mistakes, um
yep,
oftentimes the big ones are the ones that happen because we allowed ourselves to get so far down, or we held it to ourselves for too long. And part of owning it is again going, man, I am just struggling here and I
Mm-hmm.
need somebody to hear me.
yep,
If I were to go to Brent, if I were to go to Melissa right now and just say, listen, hey, I'm just kind of struggling mentally, and I was able to deal with that now instead of kicking the can for years and years and years, who knows the kind of mistakes I can make years from now because I was too afraid or too ashamed to have the hard conversation that could have mitigated this whole situation years ago, months ago, whatever it might be. We tell our students this, and I can't tell you how many times I've used this metaphor over 20 years of ministry, is if you wait till you're in the back seat of the car to determine the human being that you're going to be, you're too late. You can't wait till you're and by that I mean, with a person of anyway, don't need to go, no purpling.
Handcuffs.
That too.
I was thinking handcuffs.
Oh, well, no, honestly, that's true too, though. But I mean, I just think, like, if you wait till you're in the heat of a situation to determine what your integrity is going to be, you're too late. You have to make that decision now. And so doing the necessary hard things, having the hard conversations now can prevent me from blowing up my church, my family, my friendships, everything, my life, because of one mistake that could have been fixed. Too many people go down that road. We have to be there for one another. And so I'll look right in your virtual camera eyes here and say, if you are in that position, you're tempted or whatever, that please go to somebody, go to your pastor, go to your leadership, go to a parent, go to a friend, go to somebody. And if you feel like I can't have that conversation with somebody I know because I'm too scared, please call us. Please, reach out to us on our social media platforms, send us an email, whatever it might be. We're here for you too. We don't just talk to hear ourselves talk. We're here to be a resource for you. And if that means having a hard conversation with somebody, we don't have to know you. We're willing to have that conversation. So I felt like it needs to be said, because I think about how many pastors who have been in the news could have avoided that if they had someone they could talk to. If you don't have that, we're offering that to you right now.
Sure. Definitely. And that's something we've said from the beginning, but if you need us, we're here. We will help in any way we can. And even if that needs to be a sounding board or hey, you were dumb. Yes, that was a terrible choice.
You have to own it.
You need to start making amends. We are here for all those things. If you need us, like David said, find us on social media, shoot us an email, and we'd love to talk. But that is the end of this episode. 200 episodes. We are excited for season 5. That starts next week. And so, like I said, with that, one of the things that we're going to be doing is we are going to start doing roundtable discussions like this. And so next week, our topic is going back to the topic of middle school. Me and Melissa did an episode a couple weeks ago called Middle School Influence. And we talked about how social media was dictating the lives of middle schoolers more than high school. But this we are going back to, and we're going to do middle school, and we're going to talk about all the different things going on with communication, how to communicate with middle schoolers the most effectively, how to encourage parents to converse with their students, and then also just what do you need to know going on with middle school communication and all the 100,000 ways that they're coming up with to have conversations that should just be over a text message.
Sneaky.
But with that being said, once again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for 4 seasons of this podcast. We could not do it without listeners, and we are super excited to take on into season 5. So we hope that you have a great week, and we will see you for the start of season 5 next week.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.